Cybersecurity is more important than ever, with a 2023 Deloitte survey finding nearly half of executives saying they expect an increase in the size and number of risk events targeting supply chains in the year ahead. And joining me now with more details is the Cyber and Strategic Risk Principal of Deloitte, Sharon Chand. Thanks so much for joining me today,
It's a
Sharon.
pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, if we're seeing a lot of executives out there with expectations of elevated cyber related risks, what exactly do we need to be thinking about here?
I think the first step is really understanding what risks are most critical for your organization, because it's not going to be the same company to company. If you're an international bank, if you're manufacturing product, if you're innovating in the tech industry, the risks you're facing are going to be different. So the very first step is understanding what those high priority risks are for your organization, and then planning out what mitigation do I need to put in place to manage those specific risks.
So, speaking of mitigation, say a cyber event does happen, what are those steps to course correcting and fires that need to be put out that companies need to address that are critical?
First of all, I hope that if an organization is experiencing a cyber event, they have a well-rehearsed plan that they're going to be executing to respond to it. This is something that really requires that muscle memory of practicing how to respond when there is a significant cyber incident. It is not just the job of the chief security officer, although certainly he or she will have a significant leadership role there, but it really takes this integrated team across cybersecurity, risk management, your CFO or financial leadership, your business line leadership, to really come together and decide what are the appropriate steps to manage and contain the incident as it's occurring. And then once it is contained, figure out, okay, what do I need to do differently to prevent these attacks going forward? Often that results in technology decisions, technology implementations, refined understanding of what your priority risks are, and a focus on remediating in different areas of the business.
And so, in terms of safeguarding for the future, obviously there's a lot of internal things that companies need to be doing and thinking about. But what about externally in terms of a cybersecurity software partner? What should companies be looking for in the right partner?
I think those appropriate cyber technology partners are really critical to the solution when we talk about mitigating the risk. The number one characteristic that I'd recommend looking at is around integration, because no one partner is going to be able to solve all of the different threats and risks. So looking at a partner that has a very well integrated solution with complementary technologies is going to be that key to success. You can't just pick one tech vendor. It's got to be one that really integrates with your business ecosystem and the other cyber technology partners to be able to provide you sort of that comprehensive solution. There is no silver bullet, but certainly leading with that integration first approach will help get a cyber landscape that really can protect you from these different kinds of threats.
So, when businesses think about safeguarding their data or their people or whatever it is specific to their business that is important to them, how did they think about the costs associated here? Because if you're looking at a suite of vendors and all of that, it does seem like it's worth the cost because it is such a big deal. But that's something that companies need to be thinking about as part of the equation, right? There's a big cost associated with this.
You're absolutely right. And the days of having a blank check for cybersecurity, if they ever were here, are certainly gone now. There is no bottomless well of cyber spending. This is a business risk that has to be managed. And so it's going to take those executive decisions to decide what's the right investment to mitigate my cyber risk, just like I have to mitigate my operational risks and other risks within the business. I think the good news here is that, and I'll bring AI into the conversation because it always comes into these conversations, right? This is where artificial intelligence really has a role in helping drive cost optimization within a cybersecurity program. And I'll look at it from kind of two fronts. One, as you have cyber activities that become more rote, more routine, things that are following scripts, perfect opportunity to automate those, drive down the cost of labor hours delivering them, and really get increased control and consistency around those areas. So as I have to limit my cyber spending, or at least manage my cyber spending, investing in AI for automation around more of those common tasks really becomes critical. And then I can also use AI to really focus on mitigating some of those higher risk, more innovative attacks that is going to require advanced correlation detection across multiple different pieces of my data set. So I can use it in those two ways, both to manage my cyber costs, but also to help defend against these really high-tech emerging attacks that we're seeing come through.
Right. So between AI and this continuous transition that we're seeing to the cloud, what do you think are the biggest challenges and opportunities there?
Yeah. If I think about the cloud transformation especially, I think digital identity is it's like this required underpinning to make it all work. Think about the zero trust principles and the concept of not really trusting anyone within my environment, within my cloud architecture. Having a highly trusted digital identity as part of that becomes the enabling criteria to make it all work. I think about operating at scale also when I move into a cloud environment, the proliferation of non-human identities. So we're used to our human identities signing on to things with our IDs and passwords, and I'm sure all have personal experiences with the challenges of managing that. As we look across all of the innovation that's happening in the marketplace right now, non-human identities are proliferating as well for all sorts of devices, smartwatches, everything we are using in our day-to-day lives and in our business environment. And that cloud transformation requires the management of both human identities, non-human identities, and this sort of cyber innovation to bring those together.
So tell me a little bit more about the supply chain aspect, because if that's a critical area of concern for executives, what are the things that we need to be thinking about for that in particular?
I think there are so many different types of supply chain attacks that we're seeing in the environment. As we see companies think about protecting their environment, they can only control what's within their boundaries. And now with our sort of cloud-based economy, the boundaries are completely fluid. So we have to think about how the supply chain really impacts my cyber risk environment. That may be from embedded digital components in my software, similar to attacks that we've seen with these embedded malware deep inside of operational code. It may be a trusted third party that I've allowed to have access into my environment because I'm paying them to come and do things in my system. But now their controls are weaker, and so they can be compromised and used as an attack vector into my environment. I think that supply chain security risk is one of the top 2 or 3 cyber risks that I see with many of my clients. The key is figuring out sort of what are those priority attack vectors and then choosing the controls to go along with mitigating them. Maybe it's increased digital identity protection. Maybe it's increased malware scanning. There's a number of different controls and innovations we're seeing there. But to your earlier point on cost management, there's no blank check. So it's making the choices around which supply chain security risks are most important for me, and then where am I going to invest in mitigation solutions.
And any industries you feel like are particularly vulnerable on the supply chain side?
One of my biggest concerns areas right now is in the operational technology space. So I think about manufacturing, I think about critical infrastructure, all of the energy transition that's happening right now. And they are at such risk for supply chain attacks as I look at how they're dependent on their supply chains to operate and manage businesses. So I think in 2024, we're really going to see a focus on those operational technology risks and the integration of that with supply chain risk.
So what would you say is the biggest key to effective risk management in today's world?
For me, it really comes down to collaboration. This isn't something that we can solve in a silo as cybersecurity professionals. To really manage the risk across a business enterprise requires that collaboration across the leadership team. It requires the business leaders to really lean in and be able to say, these are the particular risks that I'm most concerned about with my business. Requires my technology leaders to drive the innovation to help push the envelope in terms of what the technologies are to mitigate those risks. Requires the investment and analytics from my CFO and financial partners. So for me, it really is that collaboration across all the disciplines to be able to manage the cyber risk that's evolving today.
Great. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for your insights today.
No,
Pleasure
thank
speaking with
you.
you.
Thank you for having me.